Hello to everyone. Welcome to my IG Live for today. I'm going to be talking about hand combing fiber. I am out on my front porch, so you might hear some background noise of lawn mowing, some birds, maybe my children screaming in the background. Hi, Jessie. So yeah, we're on the front porch, and today we'll be talking about these deathy implements. So this is a hand comb. So a lot of people are, even who don't process fleece, are familiar with hand cards, which is a flat surface with lots of like needle-like little curled hooks on them, little teeth. But these are hand combs. So hand cards, when you card them, will jumble up the fiber, and so you get a nice airy fiber so that when you spin it, there's lots of air inside that gets trapped. It makes a really warm, lighter weight sweater. However, if you want a smoother yarn, then you need roving or top. And what this does is help you prepare that together with something called a diz. So I'll show you more about this in a second. But what this does will line up all the fibers going the same direction, and that means that you will get a nice smooth yarn when you spin it. So this is the hand comb. I bought this a few years ago at Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. The company is called Indigo Hound. I don't know if that's backwards or not, but it's written right here, Indigo Hound. And different combs will have different width spaces between the combs. Yes, I'm going to talk about that in a second, Jessie, how you have to be really careful with this. So the spacing between the combs might be different. The more space, the less space, the more like junk it's going to pull out of the fiber, like little bits of fiber that you don't want. You'll end up with more waste and more leftovers. Same thing for the rows. I don't know if you can see, but there's actually 2 rows of combs here. Sometimes it's just a single row, but again, multiple rows means you're going to card out more junk. So there are 2 of them. They're very deathy. They're super pointy and stabby. So you have to be very careful how you handle them. First thing that I always do is I always make sure that I have this pointing up. I never have it pointing down, because if you drop it, you're going to stab yourself in the foot. The other thing I do is I'm wearing big heavy hiking boots so that I don't get stabbed in the foot. There's a reason why anthrax was called wool sorter's disease. Anthrax, not as much a thing these days, but you stab yourself with this, you get stuff in the cut, it gets infected, it's just not great. So a lot of what I recommend is practicing with these, always thinking about safety, not stabbing yourself, not scratching yourself, and eventually the way you handle them becomes muscle memory so that you're less likely to hurt yourself. So when I set these down on the ground, the other thing I do is I don't set them down like this. I will set them down like this so that, again, they're not pointing up, or like this on the ground. So again, I'm not going to have a kid trip and fall and, potentially hurt themselves. Hello to everyone who is joining. So yeah, be very careful about how you handle these. The fiber that I'm processing is a Romney fleece. This is what it sort of looks like after it's been washed twice. And I mentioned that hand combs are really good for lining up the fiber. So a good thing that would have been to sort out the locks and wash them in a way that preserves them. You can do that by sort of putting them on something like tulle and rolling it up so that the locks stay in place. I was lazy, but I can still kind of get individual locks out of this. So looking at this fiber, it's a Romney fiber. It's about 4 inches long. It's a good fiber for beginners to start with, because the longer the fiber, the easier it is to spin for beginners. Looking at this, you can see that this end is very white and this end's a little more yellow. This was the end that was clipped. So this was the sheep. It was clipped here, and then it reaches out to here. This fleece, I bought at Rhinebeck in 2016 from Morningstar Farm. The sheep's name was Sybil. And she was coated, which means she wore a coat, and that means that there's less like veg matter or VM, so a lot less grass and stuff in her fleece, although there is some of that as well. So I pulled these locks off, and I've got my combs here, and the way I've been doing it, again, making sure I don't stab myself in the foot, So I sort of prop this here between my knees. So yes, it's pointing up, but I'm very conscious of that. And I take the cut end and I put it on the comb just like that. So starting at one end, and there's, you know, just a little bit there, enough for it to grab. And what I do is I take a bunch of this and I'm pulling out locks by grabbing the end that was farthest away from the sheep. And I'm just going to go ahead, this is where it might be boring for a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and just put them on the comb in a single layer going across the bottom. So if anyone has any questions at this point, you can type them in and I'll see if I can answer, but I'm going to go through this whole process. So yeah, I'm just grabbing little locks and lining them up on these combs. The good news is, as I've been doing these videos, I've figured out how to save them, and so I've been posting them on YouTube as well after the fact. So Jesse, I saw you had a question of how long does this process usually take? To make a little bump of roving, which is, I'm going to go through the whole process right now, it'll take 5 or 10 minutes, and I like this less than I like spinning. So when I get in the mood to do it, I tend to do a lot, because sometimes I'll want to spin but I won't have any roving ready, and then I just won't spin. So right here I have a single layer of locks with the cut end up here just sort of grabbed, and the end of the locks hanging down here. So that was one layer. I'm going to go ahead and do a second layer. For some reason this clump that I grabbed, the locks are smaller than they are sometimes. Sometimes a lock will be like a big old huge chunk of fiber. Hi Holly, hi everyone who's joining in. And so I just put these on here, being very, very careful not to stab myself with these medieval torture instruments. For those of you just joining, I'm showing how I prepare fleece for spinning. I am making roving or top. There's a difference in those definitions, and of course now that everyone's looking at me, I'm blanking on it. But for both of those, it means that all of the fibers are all lined up. One of them, I want to say that all the cut ends are lined up, and the other one, the ends are like jumbled, which one's facing which way, but they're still all lined up. I don't remember which is which. I think top is where they're all lined up. So I put a second layer on here, and I'm just gonna put it down, and it looks like I've got tons of room left on here, but you'll see in a second why this is all I do, because this is about to floof up something crazy. So again, I'm holding this pointing up so that I don't drop it and stab myself in the foot, but I've got on big hiking boots just in case. And I've got a second one. And the way that you comb these, again, I'm gonna comb away from myself, at you, but away from myself, and you're gonna do it so that they're at a 90-degree angle from each other. So I just start to get, oh, that lock wasn't even held on there. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm just gonna start here trying to grab just the tips. I'm not gonna go close to the comb, and I'm gonna start pulling. And what's gonna happen is you'll see these locks start to open up some, they start to get floofy, and they start to transfer from my original comb in my left hand to the other comb. And all those sort of clumped together tips are gonna open up, and where they looked a little yellowish in the past before they were combed, they're gonna start looking a little whiter and cleaner. Sometimes as you do this, actually frequently when you do this, some tiny bits of dirt will start falling, so you don't want to be wearing your fanciest evening gown for this. I usually just do this in my bedroom because that's where my spinning wheel is, but if you care about that kind of thing, maybe do it outside like this and it'll fall on the floor. So now I've combed this. I have a whole bunch of floofy fiber here. I'm going to set it down. I'm not going to set it down like this. I'm going to set it down like this, but that would smush everything, so I'll probably set it down like this. And what's left here is just a little bit of fiber, and this is trash that I'm going to throw away. At first, that really bothered me, like I was wasting the fleece, but there's a reason that all of this got combed out. I have tried to spin with this, and it just makes an ugly yarn. There'll be, there's some, I don't know how well you can see, but there's some other little bits of grass and stuff in there. Sometimes you'll get little nips. There's things called second cuts, which this fleece is really good and has very few of them, but it's when an inexperienced shearer, which I would make a total mess of it, I've never shorn a sheep, but an inexperienced shearer will try to cut the fleece, but they'll kind of miss, and then they'll go back and they'll cut again to get closer, and you get these little bits of fiber that just don't spin well. Like, there's things you can do with them, but they're not great for hand spinning unless that's like some sort of art yarn that you want. So this is trash. I just kind of throw it to the side. Sometimes I just throw it in the yard. I figure birds will take it. Wool will compost, so I add this to my compost pile. And I don't knit a ton of toys or things that needs to be stuffed, but sometimes if I've got one, I'll just use this as stuffing for in the toy. So it goes to my garden, it goes to the birds, it goes in a toy, but it's not going to go in my spinning, so that's done. So I've transferred from one to the other, and it's looking a lot airier, but you can see there's still some locks that you can still see. And so I'm going to do a second pass on this. So once again, I'm going to hold this in my left hand. I know that probably looks backward for you. I'm going to hold it with the combs up, but away from myself. And I'm going to take this one at a 90-degree angle and just start grabbing the ends of it and combing it away. And most of those remaining closed locks are going to open up. And once again, it'll start transferring from one comb to the other. Sometimes this will get really stuck. That's another reason not to load up the combs too much. Your forearms will start to hurt, and so that's why I tend to do this as I spin. I'll make a few little nests of roving or top, whichever it is, and then I'll spin them, and then I'll make a few more, and then I'll spin them. So this is slowly but surely coming off my left comb and going onto the right one. And like I said, it takes a little bit of forearm strength. The other thing I gotta make sure is that when I store these, I put them far away from the children because they're klutzes and would impale themselves on them. So I usually put them in this bag that my friend Holly got me. Holly's there because it's a really thick canvas, and so I'll put them in there lying flat like this, and then I'll put it up high where my kids can't get to it. So once again, I've got some stuff here that is not going to get used. I just take it off, and again, I'll try to show you, but there's dirt in there, there's bits of stuff, there's kind of like matted locks that just aren't opening up, and I'm not going to use this. I'm going to compost it, I'm going to give it to the birds, or I'm going to stuff it in a toy. Kay, this is a Romney fleece, so the locks look like this. This has been washed twice, but this is before it has been combed. So it's a nice long staple with lots of crimp. But this is trash. So now I've got this. I have done 2 passes on it. There's a couple little places where you can see some closed locks, but I'll be able to work that out when I'm spinning. So next I need to actually get this off the comb in a way that's usable. And for this to make, you could just take this off as a big lump and spin it, but I've been turning it into roving. So this right here is a tool from Katrinkles. By the way, I've been painting my kitchen this morning, so I got paint all over my hands. But this is a tool from Katrinkles, and it has a twist angle, which I barely ever pay attention to when I'm spinning, but it's got these holes in the middle for a diz. You don't need a fancy thing like this. Anything where you've got like a tiny hole works, but I use this, and these holes are 1.5 millimeter, 3 millimeter, and then 5 millimeter. They look teeny, but they're gonna make nice floofy roving. I use this one in the center because quite honestly, I just don't even know how I would thread fiber through this. I don't know. So again, thinking about safety, not stabbing myself, the way I do this, and I should mention also, they make clamps for these. I have one, I've never used it, where you can clamp one to the table and then you only have to work one hand. But I've never done that. So this part of the process I could probably also do with a clamp, but I haven't. So what I do is I take it, I hold it tight between my knees. This right here is not gonna stab me, it's just kind of on top of my knee. And just sort of floof this up, it's almost like troll hair, I guess. And I start to pull a tiny bit and twist it just enough so that I can get it through this center hole of the diz. So now I've got it on there, and now it's just a game of pulling. So I pull a little bit out, shove the diz down, grab it, and then I have to kind of hold this so I don't pull the whole thing up. But I pull a little bit, shove the diz down. And sometimes this can be kind of hard. But pull and down, and it's starting to turn this into roving. So as I said, despite it being a 5mm hole, it makes this nice floofy roving. And I just do this and keep shoving this to the side so I don't tangle myself. Come on. And sometimes I kind of like bunch it up together, but for the most part, it does what it's supposed to do, which is great. And I don't pull too hard. If I were to suddenly yank this, then I would break it here and I'd have to rethread it. And it's nicer when you're spinning to have a nice long piece of roving. So this is not exactly even. The roving goes fat, it goes thin. It's not going to be as smooth and even as something done by a machine, but this part of the process is part of the fun, right? So I'm getting down toward the end, and I just kind of keep gathering it together, shoving the diz down. My pile of roving is growing over here. Use an office hook to pull wool through my diz. Yeah, an orifice hook. So yes, an orifice hook is something that you use on your spinning wheel to get through the orifice, the hole that all of your yarn feeds through. And a lot of times, I mean, just like a curved piece of wire would do. Yeah, I could do that. I usually just use my fingers though. And I found that the biggest hole on here is plenty sufficient for my need. So I get kind of to the end, pull this off, put the diz away somewhere I won't lose it. And for the third time, I've got a little bit of trash and like matted stuff on here that's not going to come off very easily, and I compost it or toss it. This is a big enough fleece that I know I'm going to have enough, so that's good. So now I've got this roving here, and what I do is I just kind of loosely hold one end of it and wrap it around my hand, and then I have this little nest of floofiness to spin. From my experience with this fleece and the way that I do 2 layers and the way I do it, this is probably, I've forgotten, it's like a 0.4 ounces, anywhere from 1/3 of an ounce to sometimes 1/2 ounce. So it's maybe, I'm having to do math here on the fly, it's like 10-15 grams, something like that. So like I said, when I'm in the mood, I make a bunch of these, and then I can spin when I want. So that is how I'm hand combing. Hi, Ollie. That's how I'm hand combing this fleece. Like I said, I figured out how to save these, so if you missed the beginning and you want to see the beginning, it'll go up into my Instagram stories for 24 hours. But I will also post it to the Kino Knits YouTube channel. There's a link in my profile, I think. If there's not, go to YouTube, search Kino Knits, and you'll start seeing these videos. So tomorrow my plan is at 3 p.m. Eastern, to be on here with Sarah Shearer of Imagine Landscapes. We're going to go through our Point Counterpoint Volume 1 collection. It'll be a Throwback Thursday. And then on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I will be talking with Boston Gen 1, who is Jennifer Lassonde of the Downseller Studio podcast, and we are going to talk about our Point Counterpoint Volume 5 collection that we just released last Saturday. And I know some of y'all have purchased that, so thank you very much. If you have any questions, just let me know. And otherwise, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate your spending this time with me. Now I gotta turn it off.